Let's go there. Hi everyone, my name is Amanzi and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about brain freeze. Brain fart rather. What am I talking about again? Docker on macOS. So most web developers nowadays, machine learning developers, they use Docker a lot, and this is because it is tasking to always set up your development machine when you migrate from one machine to another. It is easier for you to have, let's say you are a web developer and you need Postgres, you need Ruby, you need, let's just say those two. Or let's say you are a Node.js developer and you need Postgres or Mongo, you need NVM, you need Node, you need Yarn or NPM, and you install that on your machine and you are good to go. Something happens and you need to switch your machine, like in my own case. Let's say you wanted to switch your machine. Like in my own case, something happened to me. I was using Windows before and Windows annoyed me, and I just was like, nah, let me just go Linux. And I installed Manjaro and I wanted to start working. It's if my machine did not have Docker, or rather the software I needed to work, I had to reinstall them and reconfigure them. So in my own case, I had in my Windows machine, I was running VirtualBox, and inside the VirtualBox, I had an Ubuntu server inside of it running, and in the Ubuntu server, I had Docker. And in that Docker, I had 4 different applications running. So one application that was private, another private microservice application running. Then we had Postgres, then Redis running on the same Ubuntu Docker machine. And also we had an Nginx and proxy running on its own. So imagine moving from one machine to another, and I did not have any of those. I have to install each and every one of them. But since I was on Docker, I just needed to install Docker, install NPM for convenience sake, then that was all. So I just had to pull the code into my Manjaro Linux, and I did a make build, and that was all. Started working. So Docker was wonderful, or rather is wonderful when you are developing and you don't want to be constrained by your machine. It's also good in production, but there comes this avenue of you spinning up in instances yourself. But that's not the topic of this video. But it's more or less like I had issue with my desktop because there was power outage in this part of Lagos. I had solar installed and I also had battery installed also. If the day was bright, it was good. But on days where it was cloudy and raining, I had issues because my batteries are bad. So they were not saving a lot of power for me to use. So I had to move from my desktop to a laptop, although I did not have a laptop then. So I had to invest in a laptop. So I've always wanted to invest in a laptop, but I could not justify that amount I will put, but I did. I got a Mac, a 2016 Mac. It's there. I don't want to shift my camera, but just to show. Yeah, I will do a review like you people care. Nonetheless, I will do a setup review in case you want to see my setup. But I switched to this Mac and I started working. My first month working on the Mac was very slow because I wasn't too familiar with the new setup. It takes time to familiarize yourself with your new workflow and different kind of thing. But I moved there and I ran Docker and my life was hell. I was like, oh, Mac is Linux, is Unix. So running Docker won't be a problem. Then I went to the forums and they said, actually, Docker runs well on Linux. It runs best on Linux. Every other form is virtualization, and I was like, but I tried running Docker. It worked. Not that it didn't work. It worked fine. But the code I work with is very resource intensive, especially when you are testing. So if I just spin up the application, it will work, but it will still be very noisy. As if I am mining Bitcoin or I am rendering a video, my Mac will be loud as anything. I was like, this is not sustainable. My CPU will be damaged if this continues, because if your CPU is always running hot. The thermal paste there, I think it will spread too much, and at the same time the silicon itself, the transistors will get overwhelmed and get damaged. If you know semiconductors, they allow electricity to current to pass if it reaches a particular temperature. So that's how silicon works. So it uses heat to pass current whenever the need be. So that's why we can use it as switches, and tiny billions of switches. But nonetheless, I was scared because this can't be sustainable, and I cannot make this kind of investment and get a system that I cannot use. I tried my best. I went through forums. I sought many advices, and all of them were for naught. And I was like, how do people then use Docker professionally on a Macintosh? So the thought occurred to me, okay, maybe they are using iMacs, or they don't run too many intensive things. Maybe they just host a small web application or something that's not too resource intensive. The reason mine was crying is more or less because of the test, and I do a lot of tests on my system. If I can't do tests, it's crazy. Our test takes roughly like 5 minutes to do a whole end-to-end test on our backend, but it's still growing. And on my Mac, it was taking minutes. I have a lot of code to write, to test, and I'm supposed to do trial and error, and I'm taking minutes to test, and that wasn't sustainable. So I was like, have I made the wrong investment, or let me just try VirtualBox again? And I was like, if Docker themselves are already in their app, their Docker app is doing virtualization, what better virtualization can I really do? But I just gave it a try, and it worked fine. My system is mostly quiet even when I run tests. Maybe some tests will make it loud again, but my system is okay. So, and I was like, why would Docker implement a system that is worse than what you can do with a virtual machine? So to be honest, I don't really know why, but if you have a Macintosh and you want to run intensive Docker, or rather not a Macintosh, a desktop Macintosh will do better. If you have a MacBook or a MacBoo Pro, just install VirtualBox. Install VirtualBox, install Ubuntu Server. I will advise you to brush up on Linux commands, because you will need to set up SSH and also link your editor to your virtual machine. So thankfully VS Code already has that feature, so you don't need to use something like this SAM to enter to get the folders, or rather the files, before you can start working. VS Code has the remote connect, so you can just use an SSH with VS Code to have access to your virtual machine and the files inside of it. You have to do every authorization you need to do. You just need to brush up on SSH and also use VS Code, and your problems will be solved. Most developers already use VS Code, so who am I preaching to? Sorry about that. Nonetheless, don't use Docker app. Just install VirtualBox and install Ubuntu Server. Don't install the desktop version of Ubuntu. Or if you still want to use the UI, then you can install the desktop version. The reason I'm saying Ubuntu is because I'm more familiar with the Ubuntu Linux, and also some people use the OpenSUSE, or they use some different variants of Linux, but I just prefer the Ubuntu one, and apt-get works for me, and I don't need to go search for a new package manager and different kind of things, and you should be fine. So don't use Docker app if you want to run intensive Docker. Just install a virtual machine, the one that suits you, but I recommend VirtualBox, and install Ubuntu Server. You can also, in case you need the local host or you need to access the network, you can use your etc host. You can configure it to your VirtualBox, and hopefully you have a good network so that your virtual machine's IP doesn't change too much, so that you can always have one IP to reference to get in. Else you have to keep authorizing different IPs for your SSH. So do that and you should be fine. You can use an Nginx server within your virtual machine. All right, yes, within your virtual machine, and link it to different URLs, or rather addresses that are easy for you. So you can do an app.unix your name.local, and so when you type that on your Mac, it goes to your virtual machine, and hopefully in your virtual machine in the etc host also you also have app.yourname.local that is linked to a particular container. So you do that and you should be fine. Nonetheless, if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to help this channel grow. I will chat you guys later on. Take care and bye bye.